Sportsbiz Talks.
I'm of firm belief that at this very stage, privatization, particularly in sport, privatization and the PPP model ought to be explored.
Today we have with us Mr. Rahul Rodrigues, an experienced sports management consultant and professional with over 15 years of industry experience across associations, agencies, and clubs. He is currently the founder of Square Earth Sports Solutions, which specializes in turnkey solutions for sports infrastructure projects. Rahul, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Ananya. Thanks for having me on the show. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure is all mine. Why don't you take us through your growth trajectory in sports?
Well, I've been really fortunate. I consider myself extremely fortunate to pursue sports management as a career. Football started for me at the age of about 5, when I was taken to the opening of the Nehru Stadium here in Goa, which is down the road from where I live. And there's been no looking back since. Unable to make it as a professional footballer, I decided I would continue my tryst with sport and take up sports management as a career. And so while I kind of started my career with investment banking with Goldman Sachs, working in sports is something I always knew I was keen to pursue. Possibly the only going still with an MBA in football industry, something I'd like to brag about from the University of Liverpool. I was really fortunate, Nanya, to get a really good break in the UK post my master's at Barwick Media and Sport, a sports marketing firm founded by the ex-chief exec of the FA, Brian Barwick. So, at a very early stage in my career, I was fortunate to have a boss who was more like a friend and a mentor, like Brian. So the lessons learned there and the experience was invaluable. I returned to India in 2012, wherein I was offered a role to manage the football vertical at Procam International, who are considered the pioneers of the distance running movement in the country. And I have the promoters, Anil and Vivek Singh, to thank for the opportunities I was given at Procam while still fairly early on in my career. And of course, I always say there can be no bigger satisfaction for someone passionate about sport to be offered an opportunity of working for his boyhood team. And so it happened with me. I moved back to Goa post my stint at Procam and was offered a role at Salgaonkar, one of the bigger football clubs here. And ever since, like I keep saying, I've had the good fortune of working across various spectrums from agencies to football clubs across a range of diverse roles, ranging from business development to media, marketing, and ultimately leading to a senior role in football administration at ISL franchise FC Goa.
That's amazing, and that's truly an inspiring trajectory. So, as you mentioned, you have worked across a plethora of fields within sports, especially football. So, what do you think is the current landscape of football development in India?
Over the last few years, there's no denying the fact that football has become far more popular in the country than it ever was, particularly amongst the millennials. The sport has also grown in stature in the country and is far more professionally managed as I see it, particularly with the launch of the ISL in 2014. In India, we have a rather unique situation currently with the two leagues, namely the Indian Super League and the I League that run parallelly. Of course, measures have been taken to merge and unify the leagues in the course of the next couple of years. However, several talented players from the I League clubs have, over the past couple of seasons, already been beneficiaries of huge contracts offered by the ISL clubs. There is also a lot more sport in football than ever in the past. However, it is at the lower levels that I believe a lot more can be done and should be done. It would be nice to see 1, 2 more tiers added to the existing structure below the second division I League. India, of course, is a vast country and that does pose logistical challenges. However, given that a lot of states have very active football associations, it is paramount for the national association, which is the All India Football Federation, I believe, to work a lot more closely with these state associations and build the state leagues, and in turn, build the national leagues. So it would just be nice to see. Currently, there's about 18 teams in the second division. I would like to see that go up to about 40 teams, more similar to the championship in the UK. The broader the base of the pyramid, better is the chance of producing some world class talent.
That makes sense. Absolutely. Now that you mentioned developing the lower leagues first, let's talk about some grassroots initiatives. We constantly read about partnerships with academies abroad. Could you expand on a success story achieved through this? And in your opinion, what does an ideal partnership look like moving forward?
So grassroots initiatives, as you rightly pointed out, are the need of the hour. It's an aspect that's much talked about and debated at a lot of the forums. However, I personally believe there's scope for a lot more to be done. But to begin with, I think corporate backing and CSR funding can go a long way in promoting, the numerous initiatives that have kind of sprung up across the country. Uh, to cite an example of a success story, so during my time at Procam, we worked on a couple of pan-India grassroots initiatives with two of Europe's bigger clubs, Celtic and Manchester United. Of course, these programs were backed by the big corporate houses, Mahindra and Bharti Airtel, respectively. And every year from these programs, a certain number of kids, the most talented kids, would be taken to Europe for a training stint. And it so happened that in one of the initial years of the program with Celtic, one of the kids who emerged as one of the brightest players from across the country, because the program spanned across 14 cities in India. He was an orphan who was raised by an uncle who was an auto rickshaw driver, and he then went on to play for a couple of the professional clubs in India. Uh, and there have been several other success stories, but I think we have to be mindful of the fact that early on, a lot of the times, a lot of pressure is put on kids at a very early age, 6 and 7 and 8, to deliver results on the pitch. But I think it's important to let them just go out there, kick about, have fun, and then as and when a child takes an inkling or an inclination to a certain sport, that's where they need to be groomed on. But I think importantly, like talking of technical partnerships, I think importantly, what I've seen from my experience in Europe is that it starts really young, and then it's nurtured from there.
That makes sense. Would you also say it's more sort of a cultural problem than an administrative one, or it's kind of a combination of both that needs to go together?
I would think it's a combination of both, but you rightly have mentioned the cultural angle, because for the longest time we've in India we've known parents to kind of focus on academics, you know in terms of purely offering a better career opportunity. Cricket for the longest time, yes, offered you a viable career opportunity. But now I think times are slowly changing, particularly with all these franchise-based leagues surfacing, ever since the advent of the IPL. I think now more than just cricket, you have badminton, football, kabaddi, and various other sports that really offer viable career options.
Makes sense. Talking about culture, Goa has always been a popular destination for football, amongst other things as well. Now, given your work in the city, where does this culture actually stem from?
Goa has a long history with football. So the origins of football in Goa trace back to the year 1883, coincidentally, and introduced to Goa by an English priest. But thereafter, I would assume the influence of the Portuguese. Early 1900s, there were several Portuguese clubs that played the main league here. And yes, so I think in fact, the Goa Football Association, founded in 1959, is one of the first state associations for football in India. And thereafter, Goa was host to the first Santosh Trophy in '72.
And if you had to compare the state administration to perhaps that of other cities, are there any extra administrative steps taken to keep developing this culture?
Goa is the only state in all of the country to have an official sport, and there's no prizes for guessing that that is none other than the beautiful game. So football is the official sport of the state of Goa. Uh, post announcing football as the official sport in 2012, there was a body formed called the Goa Football Development Council, with the objective of taking football to every nook and corner of Goa and to the hinterlands. And they've set up about 40 academies across Goa. And I think also, given the fact that Goa has about 210 football clubs, so literally every village, because there's about 196 villages in Goa, but there's about 204 football fields and 210 football clubs. So that kind of shows you, the love affair that the state has with football. So I think everyone has contributed in their own way. But I think, one certainly cannot forget the contribution of the Dempos or Gaonkar and the Alemao families who've contributed immensely, over the years, over several decades now. And I think without their unmatched passion and unbridled commitment and investment, football wouldn't be where it was today in Goa.
Right. While you were at FC Goa, there was a unique initiative launched titled Gore Nation with the aim to build fan loyalty. Could you expand on that further?
God Nation came about as a result of trying to innovate to achieve two key objectives: fan engagement, as you rightly mentioned, and revenue
Mhm.
generation. With the Indian Super League clubs as it stands currently, the revenues don't quite match up to the outlay and the expenses incurred. And I think it is important for the clubs to keep innovating until such time that there is significantly higher value offer coming in from media rights, as is the case with Europe. But I think what worked really well was the fact that we saw a lot more engagement once we rolled out the whole loyalty program.
What are some other fan engagement strategies used to maintain loyalty amongst fans, or any trends that leagues in India are following in particular? Or perhaps how would you even describe an average football fan in India?
Uh, I'd like to start by saying that I know for a fact that the IPL clubs or the IPL franchises are doing a fair bit, whether it's Wi-Fi in the stadiums and so on and so forth, to kind of engage with fans. Where you probably do not see that sort of traction with football, but there's certainly a lot of clubs who are now, getting on the bandwagon. So from the ISL clubs, to cite an example, I think Bangalore FC is a great example of how they engage with fans and that loyalty. Uh, Kerala Blasters and of course FC Goa. I think between these three clubs, they have the most passionate fans. But what I'm personally delighted to see is the whole concept of fans traveling to away games. That whole concept increasing in popularity year on year. To be honest, it was almost existent during the first few years of the Indian Super League. And during my time at FC Goa, we tried ever so hard to kind of work closely with the fan clubs to facilitate travel to the away games. Of course, the job was made a lot simpler thanks to the very proactive fan clubs that FC Goa has. But it really did give me immense satisfaction to see a sea of the club's fans at the ISL finals in Mumbai last year, a few thousand perhaps.
Well, that's
Yeah.
great. Also, this question I'm particularly interested in. You recently founded your own company, Square Out Sports Solutions. Tell us a bit more about the company and what prompted you to don the hat of founder.
So it's been about 13 years, Ananya, that I've been working in sport, and as you rightly mentioned earlier, predominantly in football. And I think it's a very exciting time in for sport in India. The startups are drawing a lot of interest from venture capitalists here. There's a lot of innovation happening, and I think for me personally, it was the thought of just being able to contribute in my own little way to the whole sporting ecosystem in the country. I believe each of us can really make a difference, and the time is now.
Absolutely. What do you visualize as some short-term and long-term goals for the company?
So I would say the long-term vision of the company is to try and create a more holistic and interconnected ecosystem that will basically benefit all stakeholders, the players, the clubs, the associations, and everyone involved with the sport. One way of achieving this, I believe, is to connect the dots. So, to cite an example, how many are aware, like I mentioned earlier, that a small state like Goa has in excess of 200 grounds? A majority of these, of course, being owned by the state government through the Sports Authority of Goa and the Directorate of Sports and Youth Affairs. But there ought to be a way of optimizing the utilization of these facilities, through various marketing strategies, perhaps, and with the technology available to us today. So this, in turn, would lead to revenues for the government that can be plowed back into sport, and of course, for the maintenance of these facilities. This in turn then offers your budding sportsmen and sportswomen better facilities to train on, which basically acts as a motivation. And as a result, you produce better athletes and players. I'm of the firm belief that at this very stage, privatization, particularly in sport, privatization and the PPP model ought to be explored.
Absolutely. No, I think this is a very untapped space as well and much needed, as you mentioned. So, really hope that this does suffice and lead the way you want it to.
Thank you.
Lastly, any word of advice for professionals who may be on a similar trajectory as you and who may be looking to don a similar hat in the future?
So the harsh reality, Ananya, is that a very, very small percentage, probably 1% and no more, eventually end up making it as professional athletes. But the good thing is that with the opportunities available today, I believe a career in sports management can be immensely satisfying and rewarding. And I keep reminding a few budding sports management professionals who come to me for advice that each one in their own little way can help bring about a change and eventually make our country a sporting nation.
Really, that is the hope going forward. Thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts. It's been a pleasure to have you and listen to you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more such insights on the business of sports in India.